Hi folks, this is my second attempt at recording this. For some reason I messed the sound up the first time. So hopefully this version will be super slick because I won't make any mistakes this time around. We shall see. So I hope you're all keeping well. Um, you've been enjoying the little tutorial videos so far. This week I thought I would look at how you might create simply a cool looking kind of terrain model that you could use, say, in a game environment or something later on, or just to make a kind of a cool scene with populating it with a few houses or other objects that you might have around. So it should be pretty going to hopefully be fairly simple. There's a bit of maths in this. I'll do a bit my best to explain those maths to you as we go along, and I hope you won't find it too complicated what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start by deleting the default cube. Actually, again, I'll just make sure my screencast keys are on. I'll just toggle them because they do tend to go off. Okay, that looks good. All right, so let's select the default cube and hit X to delete it. And we're going to add in instead a plane. And immediately I'll just hit Tab to go into enter edit mode on that plane, and I'm going to scale it out to something pretty big. So I was going to say, let's say scale 100 and hit enter to confirm. All right, so that's made our plane a lot bigger. I'm just going to immediately come back out of edit mode by hitting tab, and I'm going to rename that to terrain. And I'm going to make a copy of it with shift D. There's a copy. I'm going to right click to leave that in place. I'm going to call the copy water. We've got two planes now exactly the same size right on top of each other. One called terrain, one called water. I'm going to turn water off for the moment. And I'm just going to go back, pardon me, to terrain. And I want to go into edit mode again, so I'm going to hit tab. So at the moment we've only got the 4 vertices around the edge, 4 edges, 1 face. And we want to take this thing and we want to shape it into an interesting looking environment. So obviously that isn't going to do much with just 4 vertices. So we want to add more geometry here. So by right clicking and choosing subdivide a few times, you can see every time I do, I get more and more vertices until you get a reasonably nice, kind of tight looking, don't go too far with it, a nice tight looking mesh like that. That looks pretty great. So I think that should give us a good result. So let's tab out of that again. So now we've got a lot more geometry in there. We could manually go into this and start raising for pulling vertices, maybe using proportional editing and doing that to make the environment manually. That certainly would work great. But we're lazy and we want to do it fast. So we're going to get Blender to do the job for us. So on this panel over on the right hand side, we're going to scroll right down to the bottom and select the texture panel here. And I'm going to make a new texture. I'm going to change the type here to clouds. So clouds is sort of a noise type texture that varies nicely like that. You can kind of see if you look at it that maybe it looks a bit like kind of a satellite picture, black and white satellite picture of some gently rolling terrain. You can see little hollows and hills. If you interpret the dark areas as hollows and the bright areas as peaks, you can see how that looks a bit like a terrain. And in fact, that's exactly what we're going to ask Blender to do. Blender is going to take the dark values, small, in other words, as low points, and the bright values as high points. And everywhere in between, obviously, it's going to trend, smoothly move between them. So let's go over to the modifier panel here, and let's add a new modifier. The type is called displace. We'll add that in, and it's looking for a texture here, so we'll hit that drop-down box and select the texture that we had. Now, let's have a look at what's happened. Okay, this has kind of slightly changed. It looks a bit odd. First of all, it's got flat shading on, which we don't want, so I'll just right click on it and we'll just shade smooth. So now it's looking a little bit better, but you can see those bumps are really low, and there are a lot of them across the surface of this environment here that we're building. So Let's address each position of those problems separately. The first thing is we would like these bumps to be a lot higher. So we can do that by adjusting this strength value over here. So I'm going to pick, let's say our whole environment is 100 wide, so I'm going to pick maybe a value something like 40. Let's see how that looks for peaks. Okay, so we've got lots of little peaks and troughs, and those are looking interesting, but of course it doesn't look anything like a terrain now because those are way too tightly packed. Nowhere in the world has verticals that go up and down like that so in such an extreme manner. Not that I'm aware of anyway. So let's go back down to our texture panel, and we've got a size value here that we can adjust. In Blender, if you put the mouse key down and drag left and right on these panels, you can actually change the value. But for some reason I found this one, it gets locked at 2, and you can't go any higher, and we probably need to go a lot higher than 2. So let's start typing in some values. I'm going to put in 20. That looks pretty nice. Sorry, that was 30 I typed in. 40. So keep trying different values there until you find out, what looks good. And it doesn't have to be an exact number. Just pick anything that starts to look good to you. Yeah, and you're going to get a different effect. So the smaller the value is, the more peaks you're going to see. The bigger the value is, the fewer peaks you're going to see. So it depends on what sort of a look you're going for. I'm going to leave it about there. But again, you should kind of choose what you want to see. Notice now if I just switch the water back on, by the way, at this stage, the effect we're going to get here is of islands in a sea. So that's going to look nice. Or maybe they're islands in a lake. I don't know. That's your own interpretation. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. I must say I'm quite happy with that. So now that we've made this lovely shape terrain, how do we, sorry, I'm standing on my own microphone cable, how do we color it so that it looks more like land? All right, so this is where the suns are going to come into it. So let's pop over to the shading panel. Let's scroll back a bit so I can see the terrain. And let's add a new material here. Hitting that new material button there is exactly the same as hitting the new material in here in the terrain in the material panel if we hadn't already done it. Same thing. And then we can see that it's popped up the shader here for this material. We've seen a little bit of this before when we did our tank. Okay. So what I'm going to try and do is we're going to try and make a shader that basically knows that colors things on this terrain based off of how high they are or what their Z value is. So to get that information, first of all, into this material, we need to add a sort of a node called a geometry node. Sorry, add. So I can never find all the nodes, different node types you can have are under here. I must admit, I always find it hard to remember where they are, but there's a little search box at the top. So if you know the one you're looking for, geom, just start typing it and then it'll appear. So there's the geometry node. So the geometry node contains all of these different bits of information about the geometry. And remember, it's not just about the whole object. It's this information is always current based off of whatever point of the object you're at. So this position value, when it comes to color, this little peak here, the position value it's going to be using is that peak's position. It's not the position of the object overall, but each individual little part of it. So now we've got something that actually can tell us for each part of this terrain where it is vertically, what its Z value is. But the Z values in this model, let's just pop back to the layout tab for a minute. You don't have to do this. I'm just going to do this for illustration purposes. Let's just look at N there and bring up the item. The dimensions of this thing in Z are 28.3 meters. So it's 28 meters high. That's at its height, the difference between top and bottom, at its highest. So if I go back to, so we can assume that it goes down about half of that, about 14 down and about 14 up, approximately. It won't be exactly that, but that's about, off of zero. If this is 0, This lowest point is probably about minus 14, and this top one is probably about plus 15, plus 14, excuse me, more or less. Again, it doesn't have to be, we don't need to know it exactly, it's just good to have an idea though. So it's 28 top to bottom. Right, so go back to the shading tab. So the numbers coming in from here are going to be in a range from minus 14 to plus 14 approximately. Okay, so we actually want to get them into a range that goes not from minus 14 to 14, but goes from 0 to 1. And that'll make sense in a while why that has to be. So we want the lowest points to be at 0 and the highest points to be at 1 in the model. So we need to figure how do we change numbers from minus 14 to 14 in a range to go between 0 and 1 in a range instead. Well, the first thing we can tackle is the minus bit. So if we added 14 to all those numbers, they're going from minus 14 to plus 14, and we added 14 to them always, then they would then instead be in a range from 0 to 28. So no longer going from minus 14 to 14, but going instead up. Push them all up by 14. You now start, the smallest one is now going to be 0, and the biggest one is going to be 28. And then at that stage, if we wanted to get them to go instead of 0 to 28, we wanted them to go from 0 just down to 1, we would just need to divide those numbers always by 28. And then they would be in a range between 0 and 1. So how can we make that happen? Well, the first thing we need to do is just we're only interested in one bit of position, and that is Z. How high up are we? So let's put a special node in called a split, no, sorry, or separate, excuse me, separate XYZ. Let's drop it in there, and let's connect a position to it. And what separate XYZ is, it takes the three parts of the position, the X, so how far is it that way, as we're looking at the screen currently, the Y, how far is it this way in and out of the screen, the way we're looking at it now, and Z, how far up and down is it. So we just want the Z bit. That's the only bit we're interested in. So we're just going to take something, we're just going to take that Z bit and do something. Those other two X and Y bits, we don't care. Okay, so now we have our Z's, and we know it's going from minus 14 to plus 14. So we want to add 14 to those numbers. So let's add a math node in. Math node. And the math node type is add. And we're going to drag our Z value into one of those. And then the other value, we're just going to make it 14. Sorry, let me just, I could do a zoom in on that, which I will. 14. Sorry, guys. 14. There we go. So now we've got our position. We've split our position so that we just separate out the Z value, which is the only bit we care about. We take those Z values and we always add 14 to them, moving them again from the range minus 14 to plus 14, and moving them all up so that they now go from 0 to 28. 0 to 28. So the next bit then is to cut them down from 0 to 28 to 0 to 1. All right, so let's now add another math node in. And let's take the output of this one and put it in there. Let's change this to a divide. I'm going to divide it by 28. And now we've got a number that goes, we've taken the position and we've changed it from numbers that go between minus 14 and plus 14. And we've shifted them all up by 14 and then divided them by 28. And now we've got something that runs between 0 and 1, more or less. Again, I said this doesn't have to be completely, these numbers don't have to be 100% accurate. We're going to fiddle with them a little bit afterwards anyway to change the look, but this is a good start. So now, how do we now make this value into a color that we can apply to the model here? Okay, so for that we need a color ramp. So again, I'm just going to remember it's the American spelling of color without a U, color ramp. So I'm going to drop that in there. And just move all these over. color ramp. So now this value can plug into the factor of the color ramp. So, and we plug color for color ramp into base color there. So now the way color ramp works is it expects factor to be a number between 0 and 1. And if it's 0 or less, it's going to apply this color. And if it's 1 or more, it's going to apply this color. And in between, it's going to pick off the colors in between those two. So you can see at the very low points now, we've gone to that towards that black color. And at the very, very high points, we've gone to the white color. Right, that looks pretty good. But we want this to look like a terrain, not like not just like a grayscale thing. This looks a bit like our original cloud. It should look exactly like our original cloud image, actually. So if this was to be, a real terrain, we would have some kind of things that we could expect to see. So let's add a plus here and add a new point to the color ramp here. And this should be pretty much in the middle. It is their position 0.5. So this is going to be where the water line is. So let's start changing this to a sort of a sandy color. Okay. All right, that's the start. Now you can see it's blending from the dark at the bottom there up into the yellow as it gets towards this. Let's put the water on again just for a second so you can see. And then it's blending between the yellow and the white, then above that, up to the top. Right, so sand would turn into grass pretty quickly. So let's add another one in and drag this new one here just above the sand a little bit. And let's change the color of it, this one now, this new one here, to a nice grassy green. Okay, cool. So now we've got sand turning into grass. So then let's say further up the hill, let's add another one. I think I'll just drag that out to the right. Let's say further up the hill, it starts to go into a sort of a mud. Let's sort of pick a browny mud color. So again, we can adjust how far up we want those to be. And maybe then just before it gets snowy at the top, or white can be snow, then make one more. Maybe that it gets to be kind of very dark, kind of just bare rock at the top. And you can adjust these to control just how much you want them to, just exactly where you want those lines to be, or how much snow you want on the model, or don't want. Alright, now let's just pop our water back on there for a minute. That looks not bad at all. Okay, the water's too plain at the moment. We need to do something with the water, but that looks pretty okay. Those look nice little islands. We've got nice graduation. The thing is, everything is very straight lines. So, that's a dead straight line across there. That's a dead straight line across there. You can see those transitions are very hard. And in real world, it's not like that. They're going to be a bit of it's going to be a much softer edge. So there's a simple way to create a bit of variation there. And that is to play with one of these values a little bit here. Just to move those values, change them a little bit so that they'll just, for each individual point, just be a little bit random about what it does. So let's change that 28 value. Let's move down and add in something else. Let's add a noise texture in. Noise texture. So noise texture is going to give us some randomness. So noise is still going to put out is, again, we can get a factor out of the noise texture here. So I can look at the noise texture overall. I'll just plug it in like that directly. You can see what it looks like. Okay, we don't want that permanently though. That's just to show what it looked like. So we want this noise texture. It's going to the fact here is going to give us a number between 0 and 1 again. So we want this just to adjust this 28 value a little bit. So let's add another math node in. Drop it there beside the noise texture. Connect fact to it. And we're going to do add. So instead of this being 28, this is going to be 0 to 1. So we'll make this 27.5. what's going to happen now is that this factor is going to give you values back here between 27.5 and 28.5. So it means it'll just vary this a little bit up and down, half either side. So once we plug that in now, this is no longer 28, it's going to be some slightly random value close to 28. But we're not seeing a big change yet because this scale value is too small. So let me just put that in. Once I start dragging this and making the scale number much bigger, you're going to start to see the effect much more. See, it's really softened up those edges. In fact, the snow now looks really quite snowy. It's nice kind of impact that it's had. So that little bit of randomness to this value here has made that look a lot more natural. So now you can start playing with these sliders a bit more. If there's too much sand, you don't like it, or maybe our grass color, we're not so fond of it. I'm going to change it, make it look a bit different. What do you think looks good for your environment? So that's it. So the last thing we can do on the water is just add a material to the water. Let's just do a really super simple water. Just give it a nice light blue color. Let's go back to layout and go into rendered mode. So the only thing in rendered mode now is that our light, of course, is just a point light. So that's cool if you're doing kind of a nighttime scene and you want to have some dramatic lighting that looks nice. That's not really probably what we want here. So I'm going to switch it to go to the light panel, select the light, go to the light panel here, change it to sun, and get the strength then should just be about 1. And you can obviously rotate the light on Z or Z to put the light at different angles. One thing that really highlights actually is that our material is super shiny on our terrain, which isn't right. So let's go to our material tab here a little bit and just increase the roughness. That's just going to knock some of that shininess out of it. Whereas on the water, we'll drop the roughness way down and increase the metallic a bit so that the water looks kind of more shiny. All right. Overall, that looks pretty good. So you can have a play with that. You can create your own little environments. You can play with the colors. You can do an alien landscape. You can choose just crazy colors completely. It doesn't have to be realistic colors. You can build a little model of a house or a boat, and place it around here. Try and compose an artistic kind of angle and do a render. Like what happens in that lake, for example. To create a little narrative for yourself in your head. Okay, so that'll do, I think. I hope you enjoy that and have fun with it. As always, if you have any comments or questions, drop a note on the CoderDojo Athenry blog to where I'll be posting this video, and feel free to ask me questions. You can send me model files if you get stuck. I'll do my best to give you a hand, and I hope I'll see you again soon for another one of these. Thanks a lot, folks. Okay, bye.